Well, hello, friends. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. Hope you had a great weekend. Certainly, we had a lot of fun here at the Neal House over July 4th, and you know, grilling up some meats and baked beans and broccoli salad and bacon, of course, on everything, in everything, and with everything. Um, how are you? Um, how are you doing during this challenging time? Are you able to work okay? Are you working from home? Are you anything that you're dealing with that maybe I can help you with, or um, we can chat about at some point? The chat is open for discussion anytime during the stream, but I'm also available anytime, like on Twitter. My direct messages are open. If you would like to ask me a question or care to get my advice on something, or if there's anything I can do for you at all, I would be more than happy to help. Well, today we are talking about Procreate, one of my favorite tools for the iPad, and you can also get it for iPhone, but it's it's only available for iOS, unfortunately. So for you folks who are using Android or Windows devices, or some other hardware that's not iOS, then maybe what I hope is that even you will get some things out of this stream as well, because even though I'm showing a particular app that only works on iOS, there are concepts and features that are somewhat common across a lot of applications. So there may be some mapping involved of like, oh, how does this feature exist in another app, or how do I use this feature in another app? But as far as like that particular feature and how I use it and why I use it, that's still relevant and important information, and might help you with your drawings, and helping you to um, develop some tools and techniques that will give you better results with your illustrations. The chat room is open, and I see no one in the chat room. Hopefully, there's you're out there. If you are, say hello. I'd love to hear who is on the stream with me today. Um, let's see where to begin. Um, if you have anything that you can share with the rest of the folks here, send me a message on chat. I am going to switch over to my drawing setup, and we can get started with looking at Procreate. Let me just go ahead and make sure my app is up and running. And now we are looking at my iPad. Now, I'm using an iPad Pro, the third generation, which is sometimes referred to as the 2018 model of the iPad Pro, the 12.9 inch. You don't have to have an iPad Pro to do these things that I'm going to be showing you. The Procreate software will run on any version of iPad, and most of the newer iPads support the Apple Pencil. Now, the iPad Pro is the only one that has the magnetic Apple Pencil that attaches magnetically and charges wirelessly at the top. But the latest iPad Airs, the latest standard iPad support the first generation Apple Pencil, and even though it's a little bit wonky with the lightning port that you plug into the side, it's still a fantastic drawing tool. The pressure sensitivity and accuracy of the first generation Apple Pencil is every bit as good as the second generation. So if you're looking for a budget iOS device and setup for drawing, I highly recommend something like the iPad Pro. The iPad Air and the Apple Pencil. All right, so this is Procreate. This is one of the views that shows all the collections of drawings that are in here, and you can stack drawings into categories. Like I have a category for Twitch and one for avatars and general art and stuff that I do for work. I'm gonna go into the Twitch deck, which is some of the drawings that I've created for these Twitch streams using Procreate. I've created other drawings in other Twitch streams using another app that I enjoy called Sketches Pro, and I may cover that in a later Twitch stream. But the features that I use in Procreate. Let's start with adding a new canvas. So by default, the screen size is one of the default 2732 by 2048. That's the screen size of this iPad. Your screen size may be different if you're using a different iPad device. But the rest of these that are on here are customizable. Some come with the application. I've created a few of my own. Like I've created a square avatar canvas that is 3072 by 3072. That's the canvas that I start with every time I draw someone's avatar, and that just gives me a consistent starting point for every single drawing, because the size of the canvas affects things like the pens that you use, or the other drawing tools, and just the resolution of the drawing. The sizes also affect how many layers you can have in a Procreate drawing. So like layers, if you're not already familiar with, are like these sheets of things that that overlap each other. One at the bottom followed by however many you want to create on top of that. And layering, which I'll cover in a little bit, is one of the primary tools that I use to create a lot of my drawings. It is one of the most powerful tools, and layers is a feature that almost every drawing app has. So this will directly translate to whatever you may be using. So in the Procreate app, when you create a new screen size, if you were to tap on this little icon right here, you can start to type in how many, the width and height in pixels, and it will calculate for you based on the size how many layers you can have in your drawing. So if I specify 2048, it tells me that the maximum layer size is 81. That's a lot of layers. I would never run into a need to have that many layers in a particular drawing, but some artists do. Now, because I'm on an iPad Pro, I have more maximum layers because there's more memory. On a iPad Air, a standard iPad, this number may be much smaller, based on this particular size, 2048 by 3072. So it varies from device to device based on how much memory is available to Procreate. So I'm going to cancel that, and I'm just going to do a screen size drawing. And a quick tour of the canvas, the workspace of Procreate. You got on the left hand side these two sliders. One is for a brush size, so you can adjust up and down the size of a brush. Then there is an opacity slider, so you can, for instance, at full opacity, you get a solid color. And if I bring the opacity down to maybe 40%, wow, it looks exactly the same. It may be um, depending on the type of brush that I'm using. Let me try a different brush. So here's full opacity, bring it down. Huh. Well, obviously I don't understand opacity, or something is strange about this guy today. But it should be dropping the opacity down. Let me try one more brush that I know I've used recently that works with opacity, and that is airbrushes. So a soft airbrush, if I make it really big, that's full opacity. And if I bring it down, see, I can see it changing, then it takes more to get that darkening effect. So I'm having to do a whole lot of strokes to get a darker circle. That's opacity. Let's clear this. Going on around. Up here in the top left corner are some of your tools and some of the palette settings and so forth. Like tapping on gallery will take you back to the gallery. And then there's a wrench icon that has all the settings for your workspace, for your document. So there's under actions, there's add, where you can insert photos or add text. You can do cut, copy, and paste. Canvas, you can change the size of the canvas. You can turn on animation assist or drawing guide, which drawing guide is something I covered in one of my other streams, where you can do like symmetry or spiral graph type things. It's really cool. You can flip your canvas and get canvas information like the size and the physical height and width and DPI. And then under share, this is still under the wrench here. You can share an image in all these different formats. You can share multiple layers, separate layers as separate PNG files. I do this a lot. Like I tap on share a PNG, and when I export, I can export it to box. I can save it as an image to my photo roll. I can airdrop it to maybe my MacBook, and lots of options there. One of the things that Procreate can do is create a time-lapse video of your drawing, which is really cool. You can go back and export a video of what you've done and kind of watch it sped up from start to finish. That's a fun thing to share, like on with folks too, like on social media or something. And then there's preferences, and there's built-in help, which you can go into, like the Procreate handbook, and learn all kinds of stuff. So that's the wrench tool. It gives you all these actions. Then there's an adjustments tool that has things like opacity and blur, liquify, which is a real fun thing to play with. There's a selection tool, so you can like select part of your drawing, and then after you select it, you can do things like copy and paste or remove it, or save and load. You can the copy and paste will like take that selection and paste it as a new layer in your drawing. And then there is the move tool. Like, I don't have anything right now. Let me draw something. Find one of my favorite pens. Just drawing a blob. And if I tap on the move tool, now I've got all these options down at the bottom that I can use to, I can either resize it, I can rotate it using this green dot here. I can distort it, like change the perspective so it looks like it's kind of 3D and coming this direction. I can warp it so that I can make adjustments to it. All kinds of fun things you can do with the move tool. The move tool also works with the selection. So if I come here and I tap on the selection icon and I select just a portion of a drawing and then tap on the move tool, then it's only going to affect that part that I selected. So like if I use the uniform, I can resize just that part that I selected. I can rotate that part I selected, and so forth. Going on around, there's your brush library. Procreate comes with a lot of brushes, and one of the cool things about Procreate is that you can import your own brushes. You can buy brushes from other folks, usually for not a whole lot, just maybe $5 for a pack of brushes. And so those show up as these other ones, like this drips and the letter builder and so forth. Those are custom brushes that I've imported into Procreate. The rest of these are ones that come with the app, and there are a ton of brushes. There's all these inking brushes, these calligraphy brushes, artistic brushes. I have never even scratched the surface of all the tools that are available in Procreate as far as the brush library and everything else. I wish I knew all these very, very well. But just to give you an idea, if I were to choose this, for example, wild light, and then maybe change my color up a little bit. So what this brush is doing is, as I'm lightly drawing, it's a very thin line, and then as I add pressure, it's creating this kind of watercolor effect. I don't know how else to describe it, but it looks like watercolor with some texture to it. Isn't that cool? I mean, it looks like it's on some kind of textured paper. And that's what some of these brushes do. They mimic not only a particular brush type, but they will mimic, textures as well. So you can get a really realistic looking illustration. So there's all kinds of brushes to choose from. Charcoals, if you like that charcoal looking effect, like maybe change to a black or a gray. And you see there's some texture to it. And it even understands if you tilt the pencil sideways and you're like brushing with the side of the pencil. So some pens understand the tilt. Like if you're drawing straight up and down, it does one thing, but if you draw on the side, it does something different. It does what you would expect if you're drawing with charcoal on its laid on its side. So very cool. And then so there's the brush library, then there's the smudge tool, and the smudge tool uses the same brush library, but instead of drawing, it takes that those textures and that type of pen, and it smudges. So I can smudge things outward. I can mix things up inside. Those are smudges, and then there's an eraser tool, and again, the eraser, if you double tap on the eraser, you can choose a different type of brush to use with the eraser. So if you want a solid eraser, or if you want a textured eraser, you can choose a different brush to do that. The next button up here at the top is the layers. Right now I just have one layer and then the background color, but this plus right here at the top of the layers is how you can add layers to your drawing. And again, as I mentioned early on, layers is one of the most powerful tools you can use in any drawing application. I can, let's see here. I'm going to switch over to my where's my pardon me a moment. All right. I switched views so that I could see if there was anyone on the stream. For whatever reason, the view that I was looking at a moment ago wouldn't tell me if anyone was watching at all. And I don't know, maybe I missed some chat messages earlier because I was in a different view. So if you put something in the chat earlier, I apologize for missing that. If you would go ahead and say hello again in the chat, and I'll I'll respond to that now that I can see it. All right. So layers in the Procreate, you can just add multiple layers. Some layers are stacked on top of each other and allow you to do some really powerful stuff. You can draw on top of one layer. Say I want to add something that's red here, and you can see that stuff that's underneath. I can show and hide that layer, like the layers above and below. And if I erase something on one layer, you see I'm using my erase tool. It's not erasing any of the purple stuff. It's only erasing what's red. So layers, as I will demonstrate in a little bit, extremely powerful as you can start to layer on different effects and different parts of your drawings, and gives you a whole lot more control over what you can do. And then the last tool over here is the paint, the color tool. And so the default view is this, what they call the color wheel, where you can spin the primary color around this circle and then change what's I guess you would call the not the contrast, but the I'm at a loss as to the word I'm looking for. It's like the brightness, the how saturated that color is. So is it completely saturated? Is it darker? Is it more on the gray scale of that color? And then you've got color palettes. Like I have my own custom palette for avatars, and then there's a history of colors that I've used. So like the purple and the red that I've recently used, those show up in my history. But there's also these other views where you can switch to like a classic view, and you see this a lot in a color picker, um, like web tools and so forth. So you can change the primary color with this slider. You can change the kind of the brilliance of the color with this other slider, and then the grayscale with the third slider. And then, but there's also these complementary colors that can show you as you pick one color what are the complementary colors to that. So you can there's color theory that I don't know very well, but it would be very useful to know that gray and or green and pink are complementary colors. So if you use those two in an illustration, there's a lot of good contrast there. They work well together. And then there's these specific values where you can use um, uh, RGB values and or hexadecimal. So if you have an exact color from like a web page that you're like a CSS file or something like that, or you want to know what that color is that you're using so that you could put it into a CSS file. And then there's all these palettes, and the Procreate comes with a number of palettes, but you can create your own palettes. Um, as I mentioned before, I have an avatar palette, and that's my default palette because I do more avatar drawings than than most other stuff. So those are the colors. Now that I've kind of covered the tools that are available in Procreate, let's talk about um, the things that I do the most in Procreate and how I use these tools and maybe some of the reasons why I use these tools. And then we can go from there. And if you have any questions, any point along the way, send me a chat message. Um, Thank you, Tail Learn Code, for letting me know you're online with me. I appreciate somebody letting me know that there's just not I'm not talking to crickets here. All right, so I'm gonna clear. What I'm doing is I'm on a layer and I can swipe left and do things with it. I can swipe right to select it. I can tap on a layer and get all these options on the left, like rename and select and clear. I'm going to tap on the clear. Same thing with this one. I'm going to tap twice on that layer to get this context menu and tap on clear. And then let's start with the topmost layer. This is what I do 99% of the time when I'm doing an illustration is I will create a bunch of layers. I will start with the layer that's on the very top, and I'll create what a lot of illustrators call line art. And that is usually black with some type of drawing pen or inking pen. So I will choose the brush pen. Well, no, that one doesn't come with Procreate by default anymore. I will choose the Mercury pen, the first one at the top. We'll see what this looks like. That's got some really cool effects. So this is where I was pressing kind of lightly. This is where I was pressing harder, and then I got light again. So it's got a really nice a bit of texture and character to the lines based on pressure that I'm applying to the Apple Pencil. So let's, one thing that I'm doing that you can see me doing is I'm using two fingers to pinch and zoom. Let's draw something so you can see that in action. You see I can pinch and zoom, and I can rotate. I wish every drawing tool had this, because there's some drawing apps that I have that allow you to zoom in and out, but they don't allow you to rotate. And man, sometimes you just need to be able to rotate something to get at a better angle to draw it. Now I know the iPad is somewhat portable and you can move the iPad around, but say you're sitting in a chair, your easy chair, and you don't always want to rotate the iPad. You got a good grip on it. You want to just rotate the canvas so you can get in a better spot. So I will, when I'm drawing something, let's try, one of my favorite things, of course, is to drink coffee. So let's start with maybe a sketch. Try that again. Of a coffee mug. So we'll just sketch out some general idea of a coffee mug just from memory. Maybe not that thick of a handle. And I may start with this layer, just roughly sketch something. Get the shape that I want. And I may use a pencil on this step instead of an ink pen, but same kind of concept though. So once I have something sketched up, I will go to this layer, tap on it, or I'm sorry, tap on this letter N right here. Right now, that N stands for normal, and we'll get to that in a moment. But to get to that layer's opacity, you tap on the N, and then you can change the opacity of that layer. So I'll drop the opacity down, and then create a new layer on top. And this is where I will try to draw my final line art. Once I have something, as a guide, I will trace back over my drawing. Try to find the good lines that I want to keep, the good line that I want to keep. And try to be a little more accurate. Okay, this is not the most beautiful mug I've ever seen, but hey, this gets the job done. So what you just saw me do is I tapped on the layers, and I tapped this checkbox over here to hide that that initial sketch, so that I'm left with just this layer on top. All right. So this is my line art, and then I might come in here and do some things to clean up that line art. Maybe make some of these lines a little bit darker. Whoops. Just black and white outline of my coffee mug. And I'm also using two fingers. So if I tap with two fingers, it will undo the last thing that I did. If I tap with three fingers, that's a redo. So it puts that back on. All right, so I'm through messing with this. So now I'll tap on my layers and I'll go to one of the layers underneath. Usually I'll go to the very bottom layer and I'll use the bottom layer as my color layer. So let's imagine we want this coffee mug to be something other than white. I like blue. So let's choose some maybe aqua color of blue. So we're on this layer underneath, and as you can see, when I draw using this color, that it's showing up underneath this black layer. It's not drawing on top of the black layer. It's drawing, down underneath. So that means I don't have to be real careful about staying in the lines. Like when you're drawing on paper and you draw something, you don't want to stray outside of the lines or something like that, or over draw on top of something that you've already done. With layers, you don't have to worry about that so much. So I'm going to 2-finger tap to undo, and then I can just kind of be as sloppy as I want to be. And I'm just going to outline this whole thing, and then also create an outline here. All I've done is kind of just filled in the edges with this one color, because what I want to do is to tap on this this color button up here in the top and drag that out and let go on top of the mug. And that is the way that you do color fills in Procreate. If I were to drag and drop this onto the canvas, then it would fill everything, outside of that coffee mug. Then 2-finger tap to undo. And then, if I want to, I can zoom in on a part of the drawing, take my eraser, and then erase where I've strayed outside of the lines, or take my pen and color in something that I missed. And again, I'm doing this all on a separate layer than the line art, which is the black outline, and I can do so without harming the that black layer. So I can erase something, and it's not going to affect the that black layer. All right. Now the next thing I will typically do when I'm drawing something, this may be as far as I get with some drawings. All I need is an outline and a color, and I'm done. But if you want to add some detail like shading, make it look more, well, let's start with, there's one other color that I want to add. And again, I'm going to do this on a separate layer so that I can change it however I want without affecting the other layer. So let's go to layer 2, layer right above this blue color, and I want to add some coffee or whatever. Let's say this is dark brown, and I'm going to use my same technique. I just create kind of the shape that I want and then fill it in. And now I've got my brown coffee. Now here's the cool thing about this fill tool and me being on a separate layer. If you look at the layers, you see there's this brown shape, and this blue shape of a mug below it. Well, I can say, well, that's too dark. Maybe I want to draw coffee or tea that has some creamer in it. So I'm going to try to pick a different color shade of brown, and I'm going to drag and drop that shade on top of the other brown. Now I've changed that color so that, you know, and it doesn't, again, it doesn't affect the other colors or anything else in that illustration. Isn't that cool? All right. So now on the layer above this, I want to start to add some shading to make this look more 3D or realistic. And the one way to do shading is to take one of the existing colors, make it darker, and just add that to the layer above. So here's one of the things I do a lot, and that's um, the eyedropper tool. So if you tap and hold over a part of your drawing, it chooses that color. So let's see, I've got that aqua blue now. Well, if I tap and hold over the brown, I now have that brown color. So I can, you know, take an existing illustration and I can use this technique to pick out any color from that illustration to work with. All right, so I'm on layer 3 here, and maybe I want to darken up this blue around the one of the edges, you know, kind of imagining that there's a light source coming from off to the left side. Well, I may choose a darker shade of this blue and then draw something over here. So now I've got this sliver of blue here. All right, that's one way to do it, and maybe that works. Maybe that's the simplest thing that works. But here's the pro tip. Here's the technique that I use all the time, and that is, instead of picking a color, because maybe we want to change this blue later on. We don't want to use the same color of blue. And I'll show you that earlier I mentioned that this letter N off to the side says that this layer is a normal layer. Well, if I tap on N, there are these other modes that you can set a layer to. And they have different effects on the colors and how those colors interact with whatever's underneath them. So the one that I use a lot, you know, the majority of the time, is this multiply mode. So I'll change a layer that I'm going to do shading with to multiply. Now what multiply does is it takes whatever color I've got and it multiplies it with the whatever color is underneath. So I've got this kind of the same shade of blue that was, you know, the mug, and when I draw over the top of the mug, it turns this darker blue. If I draw over here, now I haven't changed colors. It's just the multiply effect is looking at this white, and it's multiplying white with this color, or white is you can think of it as the absence of color in this case, and it is saying it's going to use all blue. If I were to draw on top of the brown, it becomes a different color, all, you know, even something else. So that's how multiply works. And what I do is I'll take a shade of gray, and gray will just multiply on top of whatever color you give it and turn it darker. So I can create my shading, the darker parts of my mug, and I can, you know, when I draw over the brown, you know, just fill that in. You see how the brown, it's turning the brown a darker brown, even though if you look at this layer, it's just, I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's just all gray shapes. So if I were to hide these colors underneath, all you see is gray. But when I turn these layers on, because this is multiply mode, it is acting like a shading layer. All right. So let's just add a little bit more here. Because now, maybe I don't like that particular shade of blue. We'll go to layer 1, and we'll take our fill tool, or we'll first choose a color. Maybe I want a something that's more green. And I'll just drag and drop that on there. And now I have a green mug, and all the shading still works and applies, and I don't have to go back and change any of that shading to match the new color. It just automatically multiplies it. All right. So another technique that is similar to shading is adding highlights to an illustration. So remember, I said this light source is coming in from the left-hand side, and objects have reflective capability, properties too. A lot of things that, especially a mug, if a light is coming in from here, it's going to be reflecting some light on this side. So it's going to be a little bit lighter. And one way you can do that is by changing a layer mode to soft light. And then 99% of the time when I'm using layer modes besides normal, I'm either going to be using multiply or soft light. And that's how I get a lot of the effects that I use in my illustrations. So choose soft light here. And again, it works just like the multiply with whatever colors it's underneath, it's going to add this effect. So I'll choose soft light, and then I'll choose white as my color, and I'm going to I accidentally undid my soft light. So go back to soft light again, and I'm drawing my white, and you see now it has this nice light effect. Maybe I can do the same, whoops, on the top of the handle. And it gives it a nice 3D effect. Maybe I'll add a little bit on this upper rim. And just to give you an idea what these different modes do, so I can come in here and change these modes. So if I change it to hard light, then it just becomes all white. Vivid, linear, and these would also depend on, white is maybe not the best choice for some of these other modes, but difference is kind of like extracting white from those other colors. Some are going to show you effects, and some will not, just because of the colors that, I'm choosing white instead of some other color. But you can play around with these different layer modes. I'm going to go back and leave it at soft light. And then if you want, let's imagine I don't know, if I do brown, that soft light turns it into some, just adds a tiny bit, I don't even know if you can see this on the video. Well, let's just leave it at that. Let's see, what else? trying to think. Those are pretty much all the tools that I use in my drawings. Now, maybe when I'm I'm composing a drawing together. So now I've got, this layer that I've hidden. Maybe we'll just go ahead and delete that layer and swipe left this direction, and you get these lock, duplicate, and delete. Um, so if you swipe to the right, then you can select multiple layers at once. And what I could do is I can delete all those layers at once. I can group those layers. Like if I were to tap group, then I get a new group here, and I can rename this group by double tapping on it and calling it coffee. And the nice thing about groups is I can select an entire group of layers like this, and then I can use my move tool to select all those layers, and I can manipulate everything together. This is extremely powerful. This is one of the tools that's just so nice about Procreate. I don't know, not every drawing app I've used can do this kind of thing where you can select multiple layers and move and manipulate those layers as a group. This is so cool. So I use this a lot if I'm composing an image and I'm putting a bunch of stuff together. Speaking of which, this pretty much covers almost everything that I typically do with creating an illustration in Procreate. There's not a whole lot else that I would do here. But maybe I'll look at one of these other drawings that I've done and give you an idea of, talk through something that a technique that I've done or something in this drawing. So really, if I go and look at the layers of this particular drawing that I did over the weekend, everything I've shown you is what I use to build this illustration, taking one step at a time, drawing maybe the Sweetwater logo, and then creating layers. Oh, there's one thing that I did here that I didn't show you in that other drawing, and that is clipping. So let me just hide everything, and I will show you this Sweetwater layer. So what I did is I started by drawing the Sweetwater text. I kind of used the existing Sweetwater logo as a starting point, like to trace over the top. No shame in tracing. Either we're tracing somebody else's work or we're tracing our own work all the time. So there's no shame in tracing. So what I did to create this effect is I created this layer, then I swiped right and I duplicated that layer and put that underneath, and then I colored it. I changed the color of all those letters to black, and then I just took my move tool and I moved it so that it was just right underneath to create that kind of 3D shadow effect, right? Very cool. And then the other thing I did is I created a layer above Sweetwater. And when you tap on a layer and you get these things on the left-hand side, one of those options is clipping mask. When you turn on clipping mask, then it means whatever you draw on that layer is going to be clipped to whatever's drawn underneath. So I drew basically a kind of almost like a rectangle on top, but because it is a clipping mask, it only shows up where those blue letters are, because that's what's underneath. Like if I were to change this, turn clipping mask off, that's the shape. You see, this big blob that's drawn over the top. But when I turn clipping mask on, it's clipped to the text. And that is it in a nutshell. Everything else that is in this drawing is using the techniques that I've described before. I've got line art. Say, for example, this Boy Scout. And I started with creating some line art by looking at another Boy Scout shirt, and then I created all these, doodles and patches and so forth. And I came and I created my first color layer, my primary colors for the vest and the shirt. And then I went in and I added a layer on top of that of colors for some of the individual patches, added some more colors for details on those patches, and then I added a multiply layer to add some shading. So if I toggle that shading on and off, you can see I added some shading underneath the arms and along the side, some shading along the sash or whatever you call that goes across, and the collar and so forth. And that's it. Those are all the techniques that I showed you earlier. That's it in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this session on some of the features of Procreate and the things that I use the most in Procreate. This has been a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Hopefully you have some confidence now that you can go and draw your own cup of coffee. Everyone has to start somewhere. And when I first got started drawing with doing things in technology and so forth, this is where I started. I started by drawing silly things that I could come up with, and coming up with just yeah. Learning how to use layers, learning how to do the shading and so forth. And now you know my secrets, and you can start doing some of your own drawings as well. So I hope you have a blessed day. As always, you don't need permission to be awesome. You get out there and you be awesome. And until next time, we'll see you again soon.